Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Amanda Shee. I'm an anesthesiologist and intensivist, and today I want to talk about our anesthesiologists, doctors, and other frequently Googled questions. This particular topic arose because I was giving a talk on social media and I thought it would be fun to go on Google and start with this term, our anesthesiologist, ... and see what Google automatically filled out. And not surprising to me, but maybe surprising to some of my audience when I was giving this talk, many of our patients and the general population actually don't realize that anesthesiologists are doctors, that we are physicians, because the first question that came up on Google when I searched for when I started with this particular question was, are anesthesiologists doctors? And as you can see from this entire list of things, there's a lot of questions that the general population has about being an anesthesiologist. So I thought that I would focus on these particular questions during this video. So first and foremost, the big question, am I a doctor or an MD or a physician? The answer is absolutely. So to become an anesthesiologist, my particular journey was that I went to undergrad, I got my bachelor's, I even went as far as to get a master's degree, I got into medical school, that took 4 years, I then matched into a residency, which took 4 years, and then I decided to get extra training because I was feeling very, very motivated and spent an extra year doing ICU fellowship during the peak of the COVID pandemic. So I have had at least 4 years of postgraduate, college medical training, including 4 additional years of really, really intense residency training and 1 additional year as a fellow. So I've done 9 years after my bachelor's and master's of training in order to become an anesthesiologist. So yes, absolutely, I am an MD, but some of my colleagues are DOs, and we have all gone through the same process at minimum of going to medical school and going to a 4-year residency in the US. Now, becoming an anesthesiologist in other countries is a totally different pathway. It's somewhat similar in the amount of time, but in terms of needing a college degree, oftentimes in many other countries like Europe, you actually don't need a college degree in order to go to medical school and pursue different specialties like anesthesia. So I'm just talking about US anesthesiologists. We all are doctors, physicians, MDs, or DOs. Now, we in the anesthesia world actually work with a number of other different team members, and those team members can include certified registered nurse anesthetists and certified anesthesia assistants. So these team members that we work with, they all have different levels of training besides what anesthesiologists do. Now, anesthesiologist as a term typically references a physician, but an anesthetist is what we are called in other countries, and obviously we work closely with our CRNAs and CAAs. And so there's a lot of different people in the team, so it can be very confusing as to our background and how we ended up getting to where we are. But the anesthesiologist, that in terms of the term itself, typically refers to someone who has completed medical school. The next question that was listed on Google was, are anesthesiologists happy? Well, I think it depends on who you ask. If you ask me, I am currently working as an anesthesiologist and intensivist in an academic medical center, and I get kind of what I think the best of all the worlds. I get to take care of sick patients and be a part of caring for them and providing a really, really great anesthetic to keep them safe. I get to work with trainees, so like residents, I get to work with them and mold them into an excellent anesthesiologist that will go provide care independently after graduation. I get to work with medical students, especially in the ICU, where they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and they're really excited and undifferentiated and feel like the whole world is their oyster, and that is a lot of fun to do. I get to work with CRNAs. I also get to work with student CRNAs, or SRNAs as they're called. So I feel like I have kind of all the things that I want in my job. Now, academic anesthesiology, often we take a big pay cut, so that could be argued as against being happy. But if you asked me, as an anesthesiologist, am I happy? I would absolutely say yes. The other big thing to consider too is that as a specialty, anesthesia is unique in that oftentimes we don't bring a lot of our work home with us. When a case is done and we're complete, we drop them off in the recovery area. Yes, I definitely follow up on my patients, make sure they were safe, that the anesthetic was great, so I can learn from it if I missed the mark in some way. But after a patient's dropped off or they're discharged, they are no longer someone that we necessarily follow up with long term. So that means that we don't have what a lot of internists or primary care doctors have in terms of having to have that continual follow-up, having to continually have emails and in-basket messages and kind of clinic things to do. All of our work is in the hospitals, in the operating room area, and in a lot of ways, our work can be done in a shift basis, a shift-like basis. Now, there's also research that shows that anytime an anesthesiologist passes off, that sometimes people are concerned that anytime you hand off, that there's a risk to the patient's outcome overall. But there actually, interestingly enough, was a recent study that showed that having a handoff within the middle of a case, especially complex cases that are really long, between the anesthesia team actually demonstrated no change in outcome for the patient. So that means that it's totally safe when we are switching off in terms of being one anesthesiologist to the next anesthesiologist and handing off a case. So I would say that because our specialty allows for more shift work type scheduling, a lot of us are a lot happier as a result of it. So those of you guys that watch my channel know that I really love to reference data or surveys or something to give you some context on things. And this question about anesthesiologist happiness was actually surveyed by Medscape in their Physician Lifestyle and Happiness Report, where actually 50% of the anesthesiologist respondents reported that they were the happiest outside of work. So I'd say that that's pretty good, 50-50 chance of being happy as an anesthesiologist. So I'm gonna go with yes, anesthesiologists are happy. The next item that is frequently asked of Google is, are anesthesiologists rich? I think that it's really interesting to look at different surveys of this particular topic. I will say that from a personal perspective, do I feel rich? Absolutely. I grew up in a very, very modest household, and the amount of money that any physician salary provides makes me feel rich. Now, rich is a very relative term. Everyone kind of interprets it differently. Everyone's perspective of what does rich mean is different. And so I feel like I am rich, but at the end of the day, it's all about perspective, and pretty much any six-figure job or salary that I could be doing would make me feel rich. In terms of the data, what I have found is that there was a Medscape Physician Wealth and Debt Report of 2022, and it demonstrated that 15% of the anesthesia respondents had a worth of $5 million or more. So if your definition of rich is being worth $5 million or more, then 15% of anesthesiologists meet the definition for being rich. However, the flip side of that is this question of physicians that net worth is under $500,000 or $500,000, and 21% of anesthesiologist respondents actually reported affirmative to that. So a larger percent of anesthesiologists have a net worth less than $500,000, and only 15% ended up having greater than $5 million. So I think that this just speaks to the disparity that exists within healthcare professionals in general, that if you go into medicine and you've already started off well off, or have a nest egg, or have some sort of assets to go into it, that you continue to be rich. But if you go in and you have a lot of debt, then your total net worth is not going to be that large. And even though you make quite a bit of money as an anesthesiologist, the reality is that there's lifestyle creep, and we've been training for a decade, and so as a result, many of us feel like we deserve all these big purchases and nice things, and are very loose with our money. So I'll let you decide if you think overall anesthesiologists are rich, but based on this survey, it doesn't seem like that many anesthesiologists meet the $5 million definition of rich. In fact, 24% of respondents that were anesthesiologists were still paying off loans. And so, yeah, that's something to consider. The next question that Google is often asked is, are anesthesiologists in demand? Now, I can say anecdotally, I get these emails like constantly every single day recruiting me for different jobs for an anesthesiologist in a variety of locations. So there's definitely seems to be a demand for my services as an anesthesiologist right now. And I think that is a reflection of the pandemic and staffing issues and people retiring, as well as the increase in the number of procedures and things that we're catching up on. So the volume is going up, but the number of staff able to get this stuff done is going down. So I definitely think that anesthesiologists, from an anecdotal perspective, are in demand. Now, that also depends on geographically. So there's more geographically desirable locations and less desirable locations. So oftentimes the coasts are considered quite desirable, and obviously the jobs there are not going to be the same kind of pay and same kind of benefits as some of the less desirable locations like the Midwest where I come from. So you can't really compare kind of the different coasts and geographically in terms of the demand, but I think overall in general in this current staffing climate shortage, anesthesiologists are absolutely in demand. Now, if you are about to try to become an anesthesiologist, recognize that you're not going to be looking for a job until almost a decade after starting this journey. So this question of will an anesthesiologist be in demand in 10 years? I don't think anyone has a crystal ball to be able to tell, but what I will say is that my best guess is that absolutely we will be in demand because there's overall a physician shortage. There's a limited number of residency spots. It is not easy to be able to expand the number of residency spots, so the number of anesthesiologists that we can produce in each year really can't expand substantially. So I do believe in 10 years we'll still have a demand, and the reality is the demand for anesthesia services continues to grow. So a lot of different procedures that we used to be able to just do under we call nursing sedation or just sedation that's led by a proceduralist are going towards anesthesiologists, both because of patient satisfaction, comfort, and there's also a safety component of the whole thing as well. So at the end of the day, I think that our services are going to continue to be in demand, and as a result, anesthesia is an excellent field to pursue. Another question that came up on here was, are anesthesiologists surgeons? No, anesthesiologists are not surgeons and surgeons are not anesthesiologists. However, back in the 1800s when anesthesia was invented, surgeons absolutely directed some of the anesthetic care that was being provided to patients. Additionally, different proceduralists may direct the sedation that's being provided to patients. So if you get an endoscopy, that means a colonoscopy or an EGD, and you get it with nursing sedation, that means that the GI doctor, the interventionalist or the proceduralist, is the one that's directing that sedation that's being given to you, not an anesthesiologist. Now, if you have an anesthesiologist, that's a different story. But at this day and age, in the current time, anesthesiologists are not surgeons and surgeons are not anesthesiologists. We're not interchangeable. We are two different entities with two very different pathways for training and two very different skill sets. You definitely don't want an anesthesiologist to be your surgeon, and most surgeons would agree that you don't want your surgeon to be your anesthesiologist unless they went through training explicitly, because a lot of surgeons who go through residency in surgery or some way through surgery, some part of their residency, see the light, as we like to say, and oftentimes switch in anesthesia. So in that case, yes, your surgeon could be your anesthesiologist, but that's a different story. Generally, most surgeons, the vast majority of surgeons, do not switch over to anesthesia and thus do not have anesthesia training to be able to provide anesthetic care. One caveat to that, though, is our OMFS colleagues, so our oral surgery colleagues, actually get anesthesia training as a part of their residency, and so they're a special breed where they're able to provide pretty deep sedation in order to do their procedure. And while they're not anesthesiologists, they can provide a deeper level of sedation than most proceduralists can. So that's a little different, little caveat there as a surgeon as anesthesiologist. The next and last question I wanted to address is this question of, are anesthesiologists respected? Now, I find this to be a very interesting question to ask Google. I would say that the operating room is a very interesting environment. It is different than anything else I had ever experienced prior to becoming a doctor. I don't feel like a lot of people can understand what it really is like to be in an operating room until you work in one. So at end of the day, what I will say is that there are certain things, as being a woman, as being someone who's a minority, there's certain things about that make me feel a little less respected in certain instances. But overall, now that I've established myself as an anesthesiologist that is clinically strong and I've worked with a lot of surgeons and demonstrated my expertise, I would say that I feel well respected. I feel well respected by my colleagues, by, within our department. I feel well respected by the surgical colleagues that I work with. I feel like there's a mutual respect there. I have a lot of respect for the surgical colleagues that I work with as well. But I will say that it takes time to build to that level of respect. And the other thing is that this whole video is just a demonstration of how anesthesiologists need to do a better job explaining what it is that we do, who we are, how specialized we are in our training in order to be able to provide the best possible care and the safest care to our patients. So, big picture, I feel that anesthesiologists like myself, I do feel respected, but I do feel like there is a public perception issue that we need to continue to work on, and we need to be able to educate our patients that us as anesthesiologists are an integral part of a surgical team, that we are physicians, we have expertise and specialized training to be able to keep our patients safe that are undergoing surgery or other procedures. So, all of that was actually a lot of fun for me to go over and do some research on. Let me know if you liked this video by giving me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you want to hear more from me in the future, and I will see you guys next time.